So I'll stick to that. The first one will be the flat inset, and it'll be on much more of a cylindrical type, cylindrical form, and then the second one will be more of a curved, with a curved inset.
Go with the base or just the lid?
Well, what are you gonna? You're gonna need to put the lid on something, right? So you're gonna make the pot to put the lid on. So I'm gonna go ahead and curl this under. I'm gonna make this and then again, remember, it's always a lot easier to clean up the floor before you start to raise the wall. So going back in, cleaning up the floor, smoothing it out. So the thing that you're going to need to remember on these first two lid types, because you're going to be splitting the rim, you need to leave yourself a substantial amount of clay up here at the rim. Okay, and it tends to be more than what you think. One of the biggest issues that I see with the inset type lids is that area, which is called either the seat or the gallery for the lid, is much too thin. All right, and you want to think about it as something that especially if it's a functional kind of a piece where the lid's going to be coming on and off the form. The thinner that lid gets, the more likely it's going to be to chipping and cracking. So leave yourself a substantial amount of clay here. I know it seems somewhat excessive at this point, but when you start to split that, it'll make sense. Okay, so I've got the thickness about where I want it. Before I split the rim, I'm going to put a little shape on this form, but before I do that, I want to split the rim. And the reason that I do that, and it'll make even more sense on the rounded form, is that you want to split the rim when you have the most support there, right? So this cylinder form, the weight, the pressure that I put down on the rim is going to be held kind of by the fact that it's still very cylindrical. Okay, so this can be done either with your fingers or it can be done with a tool. I will generally tend to do it with my finger, but I'll try to show you both. So what I'm going to do, I'll either do this with the pointer on my right hand or I'll do it with the thumb on my left hand, is I'll just slowly start to press down, and I'll try to press down in the center of that thickness, right? The center of the thickness. Make sure you keep enough water there so that your finger doesn't start to grab. So what initially seemed like a very thick rim, when I start to split it, is not really quite as thick as it initially seemed. Okay. So again, that could be done with your finger or with a rib. Normally I would use the wooden rib. I think I took my wooden rib into the glaze room.
Which one?
Thank you. So the way you would do that with your wooden rib is you'd go in with either end, either the pointed end here or here, and you'd start to split the clay. And then this edge is great, especially for the flat inset, to ultimately push this down flat. So now that I've got this split, I'm not going to go ahead and completely finish this inset. I'm going to go back and put a little shape to this form now. Now that I've got that split, I'll go in and form the piece. But I think you can see that if the amount of pressure that you have to apply here on this rim, if I had already done any shaping, especially on a rounded form, you could potentially cause the form to kind of slump or drop a little bit. So now, once I've got the piece shaped and formed, I'm going to go back and I'm going to finish the seat. And I'm going to go ahead and use my rib at this point to kind of flatten that edge. All right. That edge on the inside, you want it to be fairly flat. This edge here, though, coming up, this flange on it, you want it to taper out just slightly. And if you think about how the lid's going to go in there, if it's perfectly perpendicular here, you are much more likely as your lid goes in to get it to warp and kind of catch the lid in place. So by having it, slightly flared in an outward direction, you're much more likely to avoid that issue. So I'm going to clean up the base, and then the last thing that I'll do is take the measurement. You're going to need calipers for that. I have a set of calipers. I'll leave them out. You're welcome to borrow them if you don't have a set of calipers. Really anything can be used. I mean, you can measure it with just using the ruler. The one thing that you want to make sure of on this type of a lid and this kind of a seat is you want to make sure that this edge here, or this flange that comes up, is tall enough that when you put your lid in, the edge of your lid doesn't sit above this flange. Okay, you don't want to see that edge of the lid. Okay. Sometimes beginning students will tend to make this depth so shallow that when you put the lid in, it's kind of sticking up, and then the edge of the lid sticks above it, and you see the edge of the lid. Okay, so you want to try to avoid that. You want to make sure that this edge is deep enough. Right. So on your calipers on this particular type of lid, you're going to measure the inside, and you want to try to measure right down at the base, at the transition point. oftentimes measure lids with the wheel turning. It just helps me find the center. Stop the wheel. Just make sure that you're kind of going back and forth a little bit, because you could measure it over here, not really fully aware, and not be in the center, at the widest diameter. And then when you go to make your lid will be too small. That looks pretty good. And then can you find a place to set that over on the table? Thank you. Once you get your measurement, before you start your lid, you're going to